is very dedicated to the ascension process. She has a whole book that she's channeled called the Sophia Code, which comes from the Ascended High Master Council of the Divine Feminine Ascended Masters. And she has a whole teaching and a priestess group, all international around the world, where she empowers women to come into their connection with the divine feminine. And she's in touch with women all over the world, and it is her mission to empower the ascension. And I'd love to know, Kaia Ra, what your perspective is from everyone waking up that you're working with, and what you see happening, and what the Ascended Master High Council has to say to you.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. It's so lovely to be here with everyone today. So this year has been extraordinary. It's stretched me in ways that I didn't even know were possible. And I think a lot of people who are leading at this time feel the same way. We have initiates in our mystery school around the world, and we're growing so fast because people are desperate to finally wake up. The polarization of what's happening right now, not to mention everything that everyone's suffering, whether it's geographically from the earth changes, the weather modification, the amount of toxification in our society, what's happening with COVID, the global lockdown, unemployment, people are really hurting. And it's very challenging for sensitive light workers such as ourselves to really take in the magnitude of that. But that's what Ascension is. It's standing in the midst of the change and choosing to be the foundation of light that we said we would come here to be, as everyone decides for themselves in these very polarizing times. Am I going to stay in spiritual infancy, or am I going to finally go within and begin a process of spiritual maturity? And so spiritual maturity is not about perfectionism. Spiritual maturity is about the willingness to do the work within yourself and within your life. And so in the Sophia Code Mystery School, we work with the Ascended Masters to become sober from codependency, to become sober from our addiction to punishing ourselves for our own divinity. This is how we've ended up in this kind of multiple global crises, is that we've been programmed and conditioned for centuries to give away our personal power to an authority outside of ourselves. So this level of pain and suffering, humanity has been addicted to pain and suffering for its transformation up until this point for a very long time. But you reach a certain level of learning through pain and suffering, and it brings you to this point, this crossroads, where you say, I would like to learn about divine love from divine love now, not from the lack of it. And that's the big shift of needing to have all of this pain and suffering on a collective level to choose our accelerated growth into a more spiritually mature space where we're choosing the divine love within us. We're getting curious enough about our direct connection to the source, about the truth of our own sovereign divinity, which the Sophia Code declares from cover to cover, and how life-changing that truth is. It's just like, so much of what's happening out there is due to people giving away their power and being programmed into somebody else saving them. And we are here to save ourselves and this world through embodying our own sovereign divine light and our own God-given intelligence to download creative solutions at this time, not just for ourselves, but for our future generations, because it really is that pivotal game on moment for humanity and the planet. So I feel as though I've never seen so many people willing to do the inner work, but it's very confusing for so many people stepping on the spiritual path at this time, because I think a lot of New Age spirituality just spoon feeds them the idea that if you read a book or you take a workshop, everything's supposed to be, great all of a sudden. And we are peeling off centuries of programming and centuries of pain while simultaneously learning how to download the light of our own divinity and how to operate from that space. That's an enormous undertaking to do in a single lifetime. And then to ask us to do enough of that as a collective where we can tip the scale in consciousness. It's a huge angelic mission that all of us have chosen to participate in. And I love that you said, Deborah, it's going to be a hot mess, because it is a hot mess. And that's one of the most interesting things for me, with the amount of people that I work with day in and day out. It's like people think spirituality is perfectionism. And it's so far from the truth. It's just like we need to become both God realized in who we really are, but we also need to become very human realized. And so I think this is a turning point where people are deciding, I've got to have compassion for my own spiritual awakening, or I'm never going to make it through my spiritual awakening. And I won't be able to help anybody else in their spiritual awakening. And so there's this great movement towards a divine feminine compassion and all-encompassing unconditional divine love that can raise us up and teach us how to reparent ourselves, so that we don't have to stay in spiritual infancy. We can really move into a spiritual maturity, which can only happen in the body. It doesn't happen by escaping our body or escaping some dimension. It happens boots on the ground, right here and right now, where we decided to incarnate into. So that's the kind of conversation we have in the Sophia Code Mystery School about ascension. We've got a long way to go, and that doesn't mean right now isn't amazing, because it's truly amazing to see so many people waking up around the world. It's an honor to be here, to be of support in that way. So thank you for the opportunity to answer that question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that confirmation, because we know the pop, pop, pop is happening, but it's not pop, I'm awake. It's pop, I'm just beginning my process of this.
We're in the trenches every day, and it's unreal how many people are waking up right now. It's very exciting, and we need as many light workers activated in their leadership as possible right now.
Definitely, and thank you all, because all the panelists are doing that work of inspiring the leadership.
We could talk about the divine feminine for hours on end, but there's two key points that are really essential right now. The first is that the divine feminine, the most important aspect of the divine feminine is a word called communion. That we have the ability to commune directly with God with no intercessor in between us. And that means you can always tune in to the light of your higher self, to the source, whatever you call source, God, divine mother, divine father, and through the divine feminine intuitive gifts that are installed like an operating system in every single person on this planet. Everyone has a direct connection to that source of information, that source of mercy, to that source of unconditional love, to that source of abundance. And so when we're talking about the divine feminine rising, we're talking about us awakening to the truth of our divine inheritance, which we talk a lot about in the Sophia Code. We are absolutely holy, sovereign, and divine, with the capacity to speak directly to God. And that's not a crazy person thing. That's an essential thing for these crazy times. So it's just like, you want to be at the right place at the right time when half a state is burning down to the ground or a country's being flooded out. You should be practicing your direct connection to the source, to your higher self, to whatever you call that, because that's going to make sure that you and your loved ones, your community, your family, you're always going to be at the right place at the right time. And if, God forbid, tragedy does befall you or your community, you're going to have the resources of your divine communion to know how to rebuild from a completely new space of understanding of what we were learning from those tragedies. So that direct communion eventually leads to something that I call, well, actually Isis calls this in the Sophia Code, we call it in the Mystery School, oracular activism. We need leaders who are dialed into this divine feminine principle that at any moment of the day or night, we can tune into to not just wisdom, direct downloads of information. And taking those direct downloads of information, then this really interesting principle that's both divine feminine and divine masculine, we can take authentic, divinely guided action upon the information that we're receiving. And so a really beautiful archetype that embodied that would be someone like Saint Joan of Arc. It's just like she was an ultimate oracular activist, just receiving downloads of direct information for how she needed to go out and convince an entire country that they needed to return back to their sovereignty. I mean, it was just such a huge act of courage. And so when we are having this conversation about the divine feminine, the two most important things to remember are communion and oracular activism, and that everyone can embody that, both of those aspects of divine feminine consciousness in their own unique way. Like, we've all come here as fingerprints of God to be the blessing for each other. We all complete each other. So, and that's another thing that you can only see through divine feminine consciousness, because divine feminine consciousness is community oriented, it's collective oriented, it's a unified field. It's a mother who understands that all of her children came from her. And so there's this continuity, generation after generation, of a consciousness that needs to be parented, loved, and nurtured. And that's another reason why the divine feminine is rising now to support us in this hot mess of a spiritual awakening that we're going through on the planet. It's like, we've got to learn how to embrace ourselves. We've got to learn how to speak kindly to ourselves. And we've got to learn how to actually pick ourselves up and fight for what is holy within us. Fight through our creative acts by downloading these solutions and having the guts to follow through on them and co-create with one another, moving beyond the ways that we've been divided in the past. It's just like, we don't have time for that anymore. And that's the perspective of the divine mother. She's always like, okay, you ready to grow up now? Like, you ready to play nice with each other? You ready to build something amazing together? Let's play in that field of consciousness. So that's a little bit about why the divine feminine is so important right now.
Beautiful. And for men too, we're not talking about just women, and it's the divine feminine principle on the planet.
Divine feminine, this principle of oracular activism, it's this intuition. You can pretty much put divine feminine equals intuition. It's the ability to completely download and receive from your source. It's that receptive element that's allowing for this window of perception to open up and for you to download direct from the source any and all information that you need at any time. And that divine feminine principle exists regardless of any gender. And it exists men, women, and non-binary individuals. It's a principle of consciousness that we're embracing at this time. And it's really scary for people to open up to their intuition, because when you open up to your intuition, you can't lie to yourself anymore. You have to start living your truth. So it's an exciting time to see what happens when the lights of truth get turned on inside of us, because the divine feminine is on the move right now. The way that I'm so focused right now is through the Sophia Code as a platform, as a mystery school, as a ministry, as a movement. And there's very specific practices for activating the spiritual technology of our body, which allows for us to actually physically anchor the Christ light of our higher self, which allows for us to deepen in our direct communion with God, and then further allows us to actually mature through that light being anchored in our body. And learning how to operate our consciousness. It flips on an operating system within us, which then overrides a lot of the viral programming, the traumatic wounding, and the ego structure that we're battling with day in and day out. It doesn't mean you're not going to have hot mess moments, because we all have them all day long. But when you are learning how to function and operate from that Christ light within you, or Buddha light, whatever you want to call that source light, that can not only stream through you and flow through you, but stay within you, anchor within you as a unified field of light that you already are, that you downloaded and literally downloaded a human body into this world. When you did that, it came with the spiritual technology within every cell of your body to anchor even more of your divinity in this world. And that's actually the ascension process. It's like, how do we learn how to anchor that light day in and day out, regardless of all circumstances? And it's why I mentor with the Ascended Masters, and it's why I teach mentoring with the Ascended Masters worldwide. Because if you want to learn about the ascension process, you want to mentor with the actual people who mastered the process. And so in the Sophia Code cosmology, we call in a circle of light every day. And we call in specific key code mentors to surround us in the unified field of our own, of their sovereign divine resonance, so that we can actually practice getting used to what it feels like to embody our own sovereign light, which is going to kick up all of our stuff while simultaneously revealing to us all of our greatest potential. So those masters of light that we invoke around us, they're continually mentoring us 24 hours a day in how to reach higher and how to surrender into this operating system and learn how to function from that space within us in surprising new ways, and how to forgive ourselves as we are, you know, in that hot mess experience of practicing what it's like to live from an ascended consciousness. So that's really, you know, the first thing I want to say is like, I had to channel that circle of light with the 8 key codes around me to, very much like what Elizabeth was sharing, deal with the amount of psychic warfare that I've dealt with since the beginning of my life, but I continue to deal with every day of my life as I serve this ministry. But it's just not a problem when you are invoking such high-level masters to stand with you, and legions of light, legions of archangels, and, you know, whatever Star Nation allies you're working with. I purposely work specifically with the Sophia Dragon Tribe, and that's who I'm calling in every day, and that's who I'm teaching people to work with. So we have, that would be, you know, the first thing I would say is like really get to know the spiritual technology within you. And the Sophia Code is a motherboard blueprint for getting to know the spiritual technology of your existence that you have access to. The second thing is practice praying. And praying is simply talking to your source. It's talking to your heart. It's learning how to have a conversation with yourself and your creator, whatever your creator source is for you. That presence is always listening to you. Your higher self is always there to comfort you. It's always there to guide you. And the more you give yourself permission to have this conversation, even out loud. Anne Lamont's, she wrote, my most my most go-to prayer is, please help me, God. And it's just like that. It was one of my most favorite things she ever said. It was like, of course. It's just like, we can ask for help all day long. Prayer doesn't have to be 2 hours at an altar. A prayer can be a 5-minute pause, even a 20-second pause. Just be like recentering with your source and your higher self. Say, please help me. I want to operate according to the divine genome within me. I want to operate according to my higher self consciousness. Show me the way in this moment. It's just like, that's the everyday present moment awakening that, it's where the spiritual rubber hits the road. It's just like, are you willing to ask, receive through listening and communicating and being in that divine feminine and divine masculine dialogue? Because that dialogue is also going to bring you the next step, and you've got to be willing to take the next step that you're going to receive. So that's what I would share.
Wow.